The first thing you should know is that I never thought my life would turn into one of those stories people whisper about at Sunday dinners. I always believed my family was ordinary, steady, even boring. But nothing about what happened at my husband's funeral was boring. It was the day the ground shifted under my feet and the world I thought I knew cracked wide open. It was a chilly Saturday morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind where the air feels damp and clings to your coat. The sanctuary of New Hope Baptist Church was packed wall to wall, the choir singing old gospel hymns that usually brought me comfort, but that morning only deepened the hollow in my chest. We were there to say goodbye to my husband, Marshall Mac Monroe. Everyone called him Mac, the man who had fixed neighbors' air conditioners for decades and never turned down a free plate of barbecue ribs at a block party. To most of the community, he was dependable and kind. To me, he was my partner of almost 40 years, the father of our 2 grown children, and the only man I ever trusted with my whole heart. His casket rested at the front of the church, draped in a cascade of white lilies, except there was no body inside. The authorities had called it a tragic boating accident on Lake Norman. His fishing boat capsized during a sudden storm, and his body was never recovered. The sheriff's office told me he was presumed drowned. Presumed. That word had cut through me like ice. I clung to it like a thread of hope. Even as the church filled with mourners speaking of him in the past tense, I sat in the front pew, wearing a black dress I had bought the day before at Belk because I hadn't owned anything quite formal enough. Beside me was my daughter Simone, polished as ever in a tailored gray suit, her phone buzzing silently in her lap. My son Jalen sat on the other side, fidgeting with his tie, looking uncomfortable in his borrowed blazer. When Reverend Clark began his eulogy, describing Mac as a man of honor, my hands trembled in my lap. That's when it happened. My phone buzzed inside my purse. At first, I ignored it. Answering a call during a funeral would have been unthinkable. But something compelled me to glance down. It wasn't a call. It was a text message from an unknown number. The words made my heart stop. I'm still alive. That's not me in the casket. Trust no one. I nearly dropped the phone. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt the blood drain from my face. I stared at the message, unable to blink, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something more rational. I whispered a prayer under my breath. Lord, what is this? Careful not to draw attention. I tucked the phone into my lap and read it again. Alive. How could that be? Mac's boat was found half sunk, his tackle box floating, his jacket tangled on the dock. I had cried myself to sleep every night since. Could it be some cruel joke with trembling fingers? I typed a reply. Who is this? What kind of sick joke are you playing? The answer came almost instantly, as if the sender was watching me. I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust anyone, not even family. My pulse roared in my ears. My gaze flicked to Simone beside me. Her expression was calm, almost too calm. As she dabbed her eyes with a tissue, Jalen looked genuinely broken, his shoulders hunched. My mind spun. Was the message hinting at them? Was it warning me about my own children? The choir's voices rose around me, but I barely heard them. All I could think was that if Mac truly was alive, then everything we were doing that morning, the prayers, the flowers, the songs, was a lie. I forced myself to sit still, to keep my face neutral. Nobody else could know what I'd just seen. Not yet. My whole body felt like it was vibrating with the weight of a secret too heavy to hold. After the service, we filed into the fellowship hall for the repast. Long tables sagged under trays of fried chicken, collard greens, baked mac and cheese, and peach cobbler. People hugged me, told me stories of Mac fixing their air conditioning units or giving them advice about marriage. I smiled weakly, but my mind was somewhere else, entirely locked on that message. When I had a quiet moment, I slipped into the church coat room and pulled out my phone. No new messages. I scrolled back, reading the words again. I'm still alive. Trust no one. I thought of the casket at the front of the church. If Mac wasn't dead, whose funeral was I attending? And if he was alive, why hadn't he come home behind me? The door creaked open. Simone peeked in. "Mom, everyone's looking for you. Are you okay?" I shoved the phone back into my purse, forcing a tight smile. "I'm fine, just needed a moment." Her eyes lingered on me, sharp, as if she suspected something. She held the look a second too long before slipping back out. I exhaled slowly, my heart racing. I knew one thing, whatever was happening. I couldn't trust anyone until I had answers, not even my own children. As I walked back into the crowded hall, I made myself a silent promise. If Mac truly was alive, I was going to find him. And if someone was trying to manipulate me at my lowest point, I was going to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. But just as I sat down to pick at a plate of food I couldn't eat, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. "Watch the house title. Don't sign anything." The fork slipped from my hand. My home, the only place I had ever felt safe, was now part of the warning. I looked up across the room. Simone was in the corner, speaking in low tones to a sharply dressed man I didn't recognize. They both stopped talking when they saw me watching. My stomach dropped. Whatever this was, it was only just beginning. People always said Mac and I were the kind of couple you could rely on. We didn't chase flash. We didn't stir drama. We just worked hard and kept our family together. That was the story the neighbors saw, the cheerful couple at Monroe's Diner, raising kids in a modest house, paying bills on time, showing up at church every Sunday. But no matter how steady something looks from the outside, the truth underneath is rarely as simple. I met Mac in 1982 on one of those humid Carolina afternoons when the air felt thick enough to drink. I was 21. Working the lunch shift at a roadside diner. He came in sweaty from fixing someone's broken AC unit, sat at the counter, and ordered sweet tea with lemon. He had grease on his shirt and tired eyes, but when he smiled at me, I felt something settle in my chest, like I'd been holding my breath for years without knowing it. A year later, we were married, and instead of a honeymoon, we took every cent of our savings and opened our own diner. Monroe's Diner wasn't fancy. 12 booths, a pie case by the door, and a neon sign that buzzed louder than the jukebox on rainy nights. But it was ours. I baked pies from my grandmother's recipes. Lemon chess, sweet potato. Pecan and Mac kept the place running, fixing the grill when it sputtered or the roof when it leaked. That diner raised our children. Simone, our firstborn, used to do homework in booth number 3 while I refilled coffee cups. Jalen, 2 years younger, learned his multiplication tables on the back of old menus. The diner was our second home, and our kids grew up knowing its rhythm as well as they knew their own bedrooms. Simone was always ambitious. Even as a little girl, she'd line up her dolls and pretend she was running board meetings. By her 20s, she had a real estate license, sharp blazers, and a condo uptown. She loved us, but her love sometimes came wrapped in judgment. She'd stop by the diner in her heels, wrinkle her nose at the fryer smell, and say things like, "Mom, you could sell this place and retire." Why hold on to it? Jalen was different. He stayed close, teaching music at the local middle school, playing piano for our church choir, and helping out at the diner when we needed him. He wasn't chasing big money or high-rise dreams. He was grounded, steady. Where Simone pushed forward, Jalen held on. And Mac, he lived somewhere between the two of them. He admired Simone's drive, but he also respected Jalen's loyalty. His HVAC business, which he ran with his old friend Reggie, was steady enough to keep us comfortable. He liked honest work sweat, tools, the kind of effort you could measure in a fixed machine or a cooled room. But over time, I noticed the cracks. The diner wasn't bustling like it used to. Chains moved in, shinier and louder, and our regulars slowly dwindled. The pandemic nearly killed us, and though we survived on pie orders and stubborn pride, it was never the same. Then came the house. Our 3-bedroom ranch had been nearly paid off until Mac refinanced. He said it was for business cash flow. Reggie had hit a rough patch with the HVAC company, but when I saw the new mortgage papers, something inside me went cold. Mac had always been straightforward with me, so why hadn't he told me sooner? Family dinners revealed the tension most clearly. Simone would slice into her roast chicken and say, "Mom, you and Dad could live so much better if you let go of this house and the diner. Sell while you can." Jalen would bristle. "It's not just about money." Simone, "This place is family, it's history." And Mac, weary, would sigh. "One day this will all be yours. Don't fight about it now." But fights don't wait for one day. They begin quietly, with disagreements and side glances, long before wills are ever read. Then there was Patrice, Mac's older sister. Always polished, always opinionated. Patrice had made her money in property development. She lived in a gated community, drove a luxury SUV, and had no patience for sentiment. She liked to remind me that small businesses were fragile, that houses were just assets, and that smart people knew when to cash out. In the months before Mac's accident, Patrice had been calling him more often, pushing him about estate planning. At the funeral, she barely left Simone's side, clutching a leather folder like it was glued to her hand. And Reggie, dear Reggie, who had been Mac's best friend since they were teenagers, was suddenly harder to read. He used to laugh easily, but at the funeral, he seemed distracted. He stepped outside for calls, checked his watch, and offered me quick smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. What unsettled me most was how quickly the funeral had been arranged. Patrice insisted on it, saying Mac deserved closure. But how could we close anything without a body? The sheriff had called it a drowning. I wanted to believe it, but the speed of it all gnawed at me. That night, after the guests had left and the house fell silent, I sat in the kitchen scrolling through old photos of Mac. One picture stopped me cold. It was from just a week before the accident. Mac was at the diner, grinning with a slice of pie in hand, but in the reflection of the diner's window, barely visible, was Reggie. He held a manila envelope tucked under his arm, his face turned toward the glass. Something about it felt wrong. Why did seeing him there lurking in the reflection send a chill down my spine? The message I'd received at the funeral echoed in my mind. I'm still alive. Trust no one. I looked at Simone's ambition, Jalen's loyalty, Patrice's interference, Reggie's unease, and I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. Maybe the cracks in our family weren't just the usual kind. Maybe they were the kind that came with secrets, dangerous ones. And if Mac truly was alive, somewhere out there, then maybe the biggest question wasn't how he survived. Maybe it was why he was warning me about the people I loved most. Grief has a way of clouding everything: your sleep, your appetite, even your sense of time. The morning after Mac's funeral, I sat at the kitchen table staring into a cup of cold coffee. The house felt different, too quiet, as though it knew something had been ripped out of it. But beneath the grief was something else: suspicion. It had started with that text message during the service. I'm still alive. Trust no one. Those words replayed in my mind like a stuck record. I told myself it could have been a cruel prank, but if it was, who would know enough about my life to time it so perfectly? And why mention the house title? I tried to brush it aside, but as I moved through the next few days, small things began to gnaw at me. The first came when Simone arrived at the house Monday morning. She looked flawless, as always, in a cream-colored pantsuit, hair slicked back into a bun. She carried a sleek leather folder, the same one Patrice had clutched during the funeral. "Mom," she began, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "We need to talk about next steps." "Next steps," I repeated, my voice still raw from crying. Yes. The house. The diner. Dad's business arrangements. We should get ahead of things before they get messy. I frowned. Messy, Simone. Your father isn't even officially declared dead yet. There's no body. Her lips tightened. The sheriff signed the presumption paperwork. It's standard. You don't want to get stuck in probate limbo. Do you? Her tone was firm, almost rehearsed. She slid the folder across the table. I drafted a quitclaim deed. If you sign, we can transfer the house into a trust. It'll protect you and simplify everything. The words from the text message jolted through me. Watch the house title. Don't sign anything. My hands shook, but I forced a smile. Thank you, honey. Let me think it over. Her eyes flicked over me, sharp and assessing. Before she closed the folder, don't take too long. Delays create problems. The second sign came from Reggie. He dropped by the diner 2 days later, keys jingling in his pocket, his expression tighter than I'd ever seen. The place was empty. Lunchtime rush wasn't what it used to be, so I invited him to sit at the counter. I miss him too, Reggie said, his voice low. We worked side by side for 25 years. Feels strange without him. I studied his face. Reggie. What really happened on the lake? He blinked. The storm came quick. Mac wasn't wearing his vest, that's all there is to it, but his eyes darted away as he said it, and I remembered something Mac had always told me, Ava. Don't you ever step on a boat without a life vest? I don't care if it's a rowboat, safety first. Mac would never have gone fishing without that vest, not in a million years. I leaned closer, funny, because Mac never got on the water without his vest, ever. You know that. Reggie shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, and suddenly stood. Look, I've got a client waiting. Call me if you need anything, all right? And just like that, he was gone. The third sign came later that week when I visited the sheriff's office. I told myself I only wanted to confirm the details, maybe see the accident report with my own eyes. Sheriff Latham was kind enough, but something in his explanation didn't sit right. Mrs. Monroe, he said, storms on Lake Norman can be brutal. Your husband's boat capsized around 5 a.m. No witnesses, but debris was recovered. Debris, I asked. Like what? He glanced at his notes, a tackle box, part of a cooler, and a jacket snagged on the dock. I froze. A jacket. What kind of jacket? Dark blue windbreaker, he said casually. But I knew that jacket. It wasn't Mac's. He owned a green fishing vest and a faded Panthers hoodie. He had never worn a navy windbreaker in his life. When I pressed him further, he grew vague. It happens, ma'am. Sometimes items drift. Hard to be certain. I left the station with my heart pounding. If the recovered jacket wasn't Mac's, then whose was it that night? I lay awake replaying every detail. Simone pushing paperwork at me, Reggie avoiding eye contact, a jacket that didn't belong. It was all too much to dismiss. Around midnight, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new text from the same unknown number lit up the screen. Check the diner's office. Bottom drawer. I sat up, my breath shallow. The diner was closed, dark, and empty. But the message pulled at me like a magnet. The next morning, I drove over early. The diner's neon sign was off, and the smell of grease lingered in the air. I unlocked the office, sat in Mac's old swivel chair, and opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. At first, I saw nothing but old invoices and repair receipts, but tucked at the very back was a plain envelope with my name written in Mac's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. Ava, if you're reading this, something isn't right. Simone and Patrice have been pressuring me about insurance and property. Reggie's been acting strange too. I don't know who to trust anymore. If anything happens to me, promise me you won't sign anything until you know the truth. My tears blurred the page. Mac had sensed it, too. He had known something was wrong. I pressed the letter to my chest, whispering, "Oh, Mac." But even as the grief surged, so did resolve. The message at the funeral wasn't a prank. My husband had tried to warn me, and now I had a choice: ignore the signs and be swept along, or start digging into secrets my own family clearly didn't want me to find. As I locked the diner door behind me, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Its engine idled. Windows tinted too dark to see inside. When I stepped toward it, the SUV pulled away slowly, disappearing around the corner. A chill spread down my spine. Whoever had sent me those texts wasn't the only one watching. The diner letter should have been enough, Mac's familiar handwriting, shaky but deliberate, warning me not to sign anything until I knew the truth that was no coincidence. Yet part of me still clung to the hope that all of this was some cruel misunderstanding, grief twisting my thoughts, but hope is fragile when you start noticing details you can't unsee. The day after I found Mac's letter, Simone showed up again. She didn't bother knocking, just swept into the kitchen with her folder tucked under one arm and a latte in the other. "Morning." "Mom," she said briskly, setting her coffee on the counter. "I printed revised paperwork. If you just sign here, we can avoid a lot of unnecessary delays." Her voice was calm, but her eyes sharp. Assessing never left my face. I pushed the papers back toward her. "Simone, I appreciate you looking out for me, but I need time. Your father and I built this house together. I can't just sign it away overnight." For a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face, impatience, maybe even anger. But then her expression smoothed back into the polished mask she wore for clients. "Time isn't always a luxury, Mom," she said softly. "Delays cost money, and money, well, it doesn't wait for anyone." Her words chilled me. Not because of what she said, but because of how much they sounded like Patrice. That night, I went through Mac's desk at home. It was old, scratched, tucked in the corner of our bedroom, filled with receipts and old utility bills. At the very bottom of a drawer, hidden beneath a stack of bank statements, I found something odd: 2 insurance policy documents. The first was the one I knew about his standard life insurance policy, worth $20,000, nothing extravagant, just enough to cover burial and expenses. The second made my stomach twist. It was dated just 6 months earlier and carried Mac's signature, only the coverage was for $250,000. And the beneficiaries weren't listed as me. They were listed as Simone Carter and Patrice Monroe. I sat frozen in the chair, the paper trembling in my hands. Why would Mac increase his policy so drastically and leave me out entirely? The handwriting on the signature looked off, like Mac's, but shakier, slanted differently. My heart pounded. Had he even signed it at all the next morning? I drove straight to the bank. Mrs. Eva Calloway, the branch manager, had known me and Mac for years. She offered condolences, then pulled up our account records when I asked. I scanned the statements, my pulse quickening. Over the last 3 months, there had been large withdrawals, only $500 here, $3,000 there, each marked business expenses. But Mac never told me about them. "Who made these withdrawals?" I asked, my voice tight. Mrs. Calloway adjusted her glasses. "They were signed by your husband, though once or twice. He was accompanied by his partner, Reggie." My stomach sank. "And the signature cards I pressed? Do you keep them?" She nodded, flipping through a file and handing me the slips. I stared at them. The signatures looked like Mac's, but just like the insurance document, something about them seemed forced. I left the bank shaken. Insurance policies, suspicious withdrawals, all pointing in the same direction. That evening, I called Jalen. Out of both my children, he was the only one whose grief seemed genuine. When he picked up, his voice was soft, heavy. "Hey, Mom, you doing okay?" I hesitated. "Jalen, did your father ever talk to you about insurance or business changes?" "No," he said quickly. "Why did Simone say something?" My throat tightened. "Not exactly. I just found some things that don't make sense." There was silence on the line. Then a sigh. "Mom." I felt it too. Something's off. Simone and Aunt Patrice, they've been whispering a lot. And Reggie, he hasn't returned any of my calls since the funeral. The relief of hearing someone else admit it almost knocked the air from my lungs. I wasn't alone. "Promise me something." "Jalen," I whispered. "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything until I know the truth. I promise," he said firmly. After hanging up, I sat in the kitchen staring at the insurance papers spread across the table. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting shadows that seemed to creep across the pages. That's when my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. They forged his signature. Check the notary. My breath caught. Whoever this was, they knew more than I did. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office. It smelled faintly of old paper and lemon disinfectant. I asked the clerk to pull the notary records for Mac's new insurance policy. The records showed Patrice's own associate had notarized the papers. It wasn't oversight, it was collusion. My knees nearly gave out. Patrice hadn't just been meddling. She'd orchestrated something. As I left the clerk's office, I noticed a car idling across the street. A black SUV, the same one I'd seen near the diner days earlier. My pulse quickened. This time, instead of walking away. I lifted my phone and snapped a photo of the license plate. The SUV sped off, but not before I caught the last few numbers. That night, as I lay awake with Mac's letter clutched in my hand, one thought echoed in my mind. This wasn't just grief or paranoia. This was proof. Someone close to me, maybe Simone, maybe Patrice, maybe both, was forging documents, stealing money, and trying to erase me from my own life. And if Mac had discovered the truth before me, maybe that's why he disappeared. But if he was still alive, where was he? And why hadn't he come home? I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, and whispered to the dark, "I'll find you. Mac, I'll find the truth." Grief was supposed to make families closer. At least, that's what people kept telling me in the grocery store aisles and after church on Sundays. Lean on your children, they said. They'll guide you through this storm. But every day since Mac's funeral, the storm inside my own home grew darker. The evidence was piling up the suspicious withdrawals. The insurance policy I never knew existed. The notary tied directly to Patrice. None of it made sense if I looked at it through the eyes of a trusting wife. But when I forced myself to look at it as a betrayal, it all started to line up. And Simone's behavior was no longer the comforting hand of a daughter. It was the push of a stranger with an agenda. She came again on Tuesday morning, without calling. She always let herself in as if she were testing how much control she had over my space. This time, she carried a leather portfolio and wore her sharpest suit. "Mom, I had a client cancel, so I thought I'd stop by." "We need to talk numbers. That's all Simone seemed to talk about lately. I poured myself coffee and didn't offer her any numbers about what she flipped open the portfolio, the property, the insurance payout. It's time to be realistic. Dad wouldn't want you stuck in a house this old. You deserve better. Her words might have sounded caring to someone else, but I heard the edges, the impatience, the pressure. "Simone," I said carefully, "why are you so interested in the insurance money that's not yours?" She blinked, too fast, then smiled with polished sweetness. "I'm interested because I care. Mom. Because I don't want you scammed by strangers. If I manage the funds, you'll be secure." Her voice softened, but her eyes sharpened. That look reminded me of Patrice. "I'm not signing anything," I said, pushing the folder back toward her. "Not until I understand where all that money went from Dad's account." For the first time, she didn't hide her irritation. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're being unreasonable." "No," I whispered. "I'm being cautious. There's a difference." She snapped the folder shut and stood. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Mom, you'll regret it." The words lingered in the kitchen long after she left. That night, I called Jalen. His voice was warm, worn with grief, but still steady, the opposite of Simone's polished hardness. "Something's wrong." "Jalen," I said, laying out the receipts, the fake-looking signatures, the new insurance policy. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he exhaled sharply. I knew it. "Mom, I didn't want to say anything, but I've seen Patrice and Simone whispering, always stepping away when I walk into a room, and Reggie, Dad's so-called partner, he's vanished. Won't return my calls." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Do you think they—" "Yeah," he said bluntly. "I do, and I think Dad did too." His words both shattered me and gave me strength. The following afternoon, I returned to Mac's workshop. The scent of oil and wood shavings still hung in the air, a ghost of the man who'd spent decades building there. As I sifted through his drawers, my hand brushed against a thin folder wedged behind the tool cabinet. Inside, I found copies of invoices, large orders for industrial chemicals, signed M. Carter. But Mac never handled chemicals like that. He fixed engines and built cabinets. Why would he need solvents strong enough to strip paint or poison a man? My stomach churned. The signatures matched the ones on the suspicious bank withdrawals. Someone had been forging his name for months. When I showed the folder to Jalen later that evening, he rubbed his forehead. This is worse than I thought. They weren't just after insurance money, they were setting up a whole paper trail, making it look like Dad was careless, maybe even reckless. And now they want me to sign everything away, I whispered. He met my eyes. We need more. Something undeniable. Because if Simone and Patrice are willing to forge Dad's signature, they won't think twice about painting you as unstable. I shivered. He was right. That night, I barely slept. Around midnight, as the wind rattled the windows, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. You're close, but be careful. They already planned one accident. Don't let them plan another. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the old train station. Come alone. This is about Mac. I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the glow of the message. My hands trembled as I held the phone. Whoever was sending these texts knew too much to be a prankster. And the way they phrased it, they already planned one accident. My breath caught in my throat. Was Mac's death not an accident at all? I clutched the phone, my mind racing. If I went, I might finally get answers. If I didn't, I might never know the truth. As dawn crept across the sky, painting the horizon gold, I whispered to myself the same words Mac used to say before facing a hard job. Face it, head on. Ava. Always head on. Tomorrow, I would go. But I also knew this Simone and Patrice were tightening their grip, and if I didn't outsmart them soon, I might end up buried under the very lies they were spinning. The old train station hadn't been used in decades. Its roof sagged, and weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement. When I pulled into the empty lot, the silence felt heavy, broken only by the distant hum of cicadas. I sat in the car for a long moment, clutching my purse. Inside, I had Mac's letter, the forged insurance documents, and the folder of receipts from his workshop. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. The text had said, "Come alone." So I did. At exactly 10 a.m., a figure emerged from the shadows of the platform, a man maybe in his late 40s, wearing a faded jacket and carrying a small satchel. His face was unfamiliar, but his eyes scanned the lot carefully before he approached. Mrs. Carter. His voice was low, cautious. "Yes," I said, gripping my purse tighter. "Who are you? My name's Marcus Green. I'm a private investigator. Mac hired me 3 weeks before the funeral. My knees nearly buckled." "What do you mean? He hired you?" Marcus opened the satchel and pulled out a slim recorder and a stack of photographs. "Your husband suspected something was wrong. He thought Simone and Patrice were plotting behind his back. He wanted proof." I shook my head slowly, disbelief and dread tangling in my chest. "No. He never told me. He didn't want to worry you until he had evidence," Marcus said. But then, things moved faster than he expected. He pressed play on the recorder. Mac's voice filled the quiet air. My breath caught as I heard him say, "Marquise, if something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Simone's been pushing hard about the insurance. Patrice keeps showing up at the shop, asking about the deed to the house. I don't trust them." Tears stung my eyes. It was Mac. His voice, his caution, his instinct. He'd known. Marcus handed me the photos. The first showed Simone walking into a downtown law office with Patrice. Another showed them shaking hands with Reggie, Mac's partner, outside a bar. In each shot, their faces were tense, conspiratorial. "They've been working together," Marcus explained. Your daughter, her aunt, and your husband's partner. I don't think it was just about money. I think they wanted control over everything Mac owned, including the business. My stomach twisted. So you're saying Simone betrayed her own father? Marcus hesitated. The evidence points that way. But there's more. He pulled out another document, an official-looking copy of the new insurance policy. But this one had a handwritten note attached, filed under emergency clause, rushed signature, not verified. Your husband didn't sign this willingly, Marcus said. I believe his signature was forged with the help of a complicit notary. I closed my eyes. It was the confirmation I both dreaded and needed. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice shaking. Why didn't you go to the police? I tried, Marcus said firmly. But without Mac alive to confirm it, the police brushed it off as a family dispute. And Simone has connections. Her firm works with half the city council. Patrice, too. They have influence. He leaned closer. But Mac left something else for you. Something he wanted you to see if the worst happened. From the satchel. He pulled a small sealed envelope with my name written on it in Mac's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a short letter. My Ava. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop them. Don't let them trick you into signing anything. Simone may believe she's protecting the family, but Patrice has poisoned her mind. And Reggie, he's not who you think he is. Trust your instincts. Protect Jalen. He's the only one who still sees the truth. Love. Mac. I pressed the letter to my chest, my tears falling freely. Reggie, I whispered. What about him? Marcus's expression hardened. That's the part you don't know yet. Reggie wasn't just Mac's partner. He was Patrice's silent investor, and he's been funneling money out of the business for years. My breath caught. So Mac's shop was already compromised. Marcus finished. Your husband started piecing it together. That's when the pressure escalated. That's why he came to me. The pieces clicked together in my mind like shards of broken glass. The forged documents, the withdrawals, Simone's sudden obsession with control, Patrice's constant presence, Reggie's disappearance. It wasn't random. It was a web. Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice. I have more evidence recordings, bank statements, enough to raise serious questions in court. But you need to be careful. They're watching you. That's why I sent those texts instead of meeting sooner. I stared at him. It was you. You sent the messages, some of the warnings. Yes, he admitted. But not all of them. That first message, the one about him being alive, I didn't send that. The relief that washed over me was mixed with fear. At least the mysterious texts weren't a cruel trick. But now the danger felt sharper. More real. Mrs. Carter, Marcus said, his tone firm. You're standing on the edge of something big. If you move too fast, they'll paint you as unstable. But if you move too slow, they'll box you in legally. You need to gather everything you can quietly and then strike at the right moment. I folded Mac's letter and tucked it into my purse. My heart was racing, but for the first time since the funeral, I felt something steady under the fear purpose. I'll do whatever it takes, I whispered. Marcus gave a single nod. Good. Because from what I've seen, they won't stop until they have it all. And you, Mrs. Carter, you're the last obstacle in their way. As I left the station, the autumn air felt colder, heavier. But I held on to Mac's letter like a lifeline. He had trusted me to finish what he started. And now, I knew one thing for certain. Simone wasn't just misguided. She was entangled in something far darker than I imagined. But if Patrice had poisoned her mind, as Max said, what had Simone agreed to and how far would she go? The questions burned in me as I drove home, unaware that the real storm was only beginning. The days after meeting Marcus felt like walking across thin ice, every step more dangerous than the last. I carried Mac's letter everywhere, tucked inside my purse, the way a soldier carries a weapon. It reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that my husband had seen the danger too, but even armed with the truth. I wasn't prepared for how fast things would unravel. On Friday afternoon, Simone arrived with Patrice again. This time, they didn't even pretend to be comforting. Patrice's heels clicked across my kitchen tile like a judge's gavel. Simone placed a neat stack of papers on the table and slid a pen toward me. "Mom, enough delays. We need you to sign. The buyers are lined up. Once this closes, you'll be free to move into a retirement condo. Safe, comfortable, no stress." Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted to Patrice for reassurance. I didn't touch the pen. "Your father built this house with his hands. He wanted me to live here, not in some box you picked out." Patrice leaned forward, her voice silk over steel. "Ava, you're letting grief cloud your judgment. This house is a burden. Let us lift it for you." Something inside me snapped. I pulled out Mac's handwritten note from his workshop and laid it flat on the table. His words, scrawled in pen, stared up at them, Simone and Patrice pushing insurance. "Don't trust them." Simone froze. Patrice's expression flickered just for an instant before settling back into its calm mask. Mac was tired. Patrice said smoothly. He scribbled nonsense. You can't take a grieving man's paranoia seriously. But Simone's eyes betrayed her. She looked rattled, cornered. That was when I realized Simone wasn't leading this. She was following Patrice's script. I pushed the papers back. "I'm not signing. Not today. Not ever." Simone stood abruptly, gathering the documents with shaking hands. Patrice placed a hand on her shoulder, steering her toward the door, but not before whispering to me, "You'll regret this, Ava. Sooner than you think." The words lingered like smoke. That night, Jalen came by. He found me pacing the kitchen, Mac's notes still on the table. I told him everything, the forged documents, the withdrawals, the meeting with Marcus. His face hardened with each revelation. "They're cornering you. Mom," he said, "we need to dig deeper. If Patrice and Simone are working with Reggie, there'll be a paper trail. Over the next 2 days, Jalen and I searched. He combed through property records. I went back through Mac's old shop receipts. That's when the next blow landed. On Sunday evening, Jalen arrived carrying a thick folder. "Mom, you need to see this." Inside were copies of deeds. One name repeated over and over, Patrice Monroe, Development LLC. But on one document filed just 2 weeks before Mac's death, the workshop property had been transferred out of Mac's name. To who I whispered. Jalen pointed. "A holding company. Guess who runs it, Reggie?" My knees nearly gave out. Jalen slid another page forward, and there it was. Simone's signature, neat and deliberate, listed as witness. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't Patrice pressuring her. This wasn't a mistake. My own daughter had stood beside them. A memory flashed before me, Simone at 8 years old, braids swinging as she scribbled homework in booth number 3 at the diner. She had once looked up at me and said, "Don't worry, Mom. When I grow up, I'll take care of you." The memory stabbed deeper than any forged signature ever could. My daughter hadn't just turned away from me. She had turned against her father's memory, too. It felt like betrayal layered on betrayal. Mac's partner, his sister-in-law, and his own child entangled in a scheme to strip him of everything. And then Jalen said the words that turned my blood cold. "Mom, I overheard Patrice on the phone," she said. "The certificate's taken care of. No one will question it." I gripped the edge of the table. "Certificate, the death certificate." Jalen said grimly, "She paid someone to call it natural causes. But Marcus told you about the poisoning. If we can prove the certificate is false, their whole plan crumbles." My head spun. Mac's death wasn't just suspicious, it had been staged, sealed with lies in official ink. Before I could respond, headlights flashed through the window. A car idled outside, its engine low and menacing. I peeked through the curtain. My breath caught. Simone sat in the driver's seat, Patrice beside her, in the back. Reggie leaned forward, his face lit by the glow of his phone. They weren't here by accident. They were watching me. I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering. Jalen, they're outside. He rushed to the curtain, his jaw tightening. They know we're onto them for long minutes. The car just sat there. 3 silhouettes against the dim streetlight, waiting, watching. As the car disappeared, I pressed a hand against my chest. It wasn't Patrice's threats or Reggie's cowardice that cut the deepest. It was Simone's face in that driver's seat. My baby girl, the one I had carried, raised and defended, now sitting among the very people plotting to erase me. The betrayal of a child doesn't just wound, it hollows you out. And yet, through the hollow, I felt something else, rising resolve, and Marcus's last text replayed in my mind. They're planning to declare you incompetent. Court hearing. Monday. If they win, they control everything. I sank into a chair, clutching Mac's note. My own daughter had stood beside them, pen in hand, while they dismantled everything her father built. The grief I felt at Mac's funeral had been crushing. But this was something else entirely. Grief sharpened into fury. They thought they could erase Mac with forged signatures. They thought they could silence me by questioning my sanity. But they had underestimated me. I whispered into the empty kitchen, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. You took my husband. You won't take me. The battle lines were drawn. The night Simone, Patrice, and Reggie idled outside my house. I knew one thing for certain: if I didn't fight back now, I'd lose everything Mac and I built, and maybe even my freedom. Grief had left me shaky, but betrayal hardened me. They thought I was weak, a lonely widow too fragile to stand on her own. They thought wrong. The next morning, I called Marcus. His voice was low but urgent. I told you they'd try to push you into incompetency court. He said, that's their fastest route to full control, but there's a way to stop them. I leaned against the kitchen counter, gripping the phone tight. Tell me, we gather evidence, not just suspicion, solid proof, forged signatures, financial trails, witnesses who can testify. Once we have that, we take it to the district attorney. The key is timing. You have to walk into court with everything ready. I exhaled slowly. Then let's get to work. For the first time in weeks, I felt strength replacing despair. That afternoon, Jalen came over. He carried 2 cups of coffee and the same determined fire I saw in Mac's eyes when he took on a tough job. Mom, he said, we're not just going to survive this. We're going to beat them at their own game. Together. We created a list. 1, the forged signatures from the insurance policies and the suspicious receipts. 2, the false property transfer Patrice's company and Reggie's holding firm. 3, the death certificate altered with a payoff. 4, the financial motive Simone and Patrice's shared accounts, Reggie's debts. We don't need everything, Jalen said, just enough that even a skeptical judge can't deny it. Marcus joined us that evening with another folder. Inside were recordings Mac had given him before he died. In one, Mac's voice said, Reggie keeps asking strange questions what time I eat breakfast, whether Ava comes to the shop. Feels like he's planning something. Hearing his voice again nearly broke me, but it also fueled my resolve. Mac hadn't been paranoid. He had been right. Step 1 of our plan was confirming the forgery. Marcus suggested a handwriting analyst he trusted, a retired FBI examiner who owed him a favor. We sent copies of Mac's real signatures alongside the insurance documents. Within 48 hours, the analyst called back. These aren't authentic. The handwriting expert confirmed what my heart already knew. Those papers weren't signed by Mac. Someone had forced his name onto them. If you push this in court, it won't stand. Solid proof, in black and white. Step 2 was following the money. Jalen dug into public filings late at night. Mom, he said one evening, look at this. Simone moved $25,000 into Patrice's business account the same week Dad's insurance was updated. Then another $10,000 disappeared into Reggie's holding firm. They were splitting the pie before Dad was even gone. I pressed my hand to my mouth, sickened. My daughter had carved up her father's life like a real estate deal, but disgust gave way to determination. The hardest step was the death certificate. Marcus explained the hospital records wouldn't match the certificate. If we can show the discrepancy, the DA will have grounds to reopen the case. So we requested Mac's medical files under next of kin rights. When I opened them, my hands trembled. The doctor had noted signs of toxic ingestion confusion, sudden blindness, organ stress, but the final death certificate, signed 2 days later, listed heart failure. 2 different stories, both in official ink. That was the crack we needed, with each piece of evidence. I felt the tide turning. But revenge wasn't just about proof, it was about strategy. They'll try to corner you at the incompetency hearing, Marcus warned. They'll bring in a friendly doctor to declare you paranoid. If you lose there, all this evidence means nothing. They'll control it. Then I need to walk into that courtroom sharper than ever. I said, we prepared like it was war. Jalen coached me with practice questions. Marcus rehearsed testimony. I gathered letters from friends, neighbors, even our pastor, each one attesting to my clarity and strength. And quietly, I set my own trap on Sunday afternoon. I invited Simone and Patrice over. I pretended to waver, acting hesitant and frail. You're right, I said softly. Stirring tea I never intended to drink. Maybe I can't handle the house anymore. Maybe signing is best. Their eyes lit up, greedy and careless. Simone pulled the papers from her purse instantly. Patrice leaned in, urging. This is wise. Ava, you're doing the right thing. But before I touched the pen, I said, oh, by the way, could you explain why Dad's death certificate says heart failure, when the hospital records list toxic ingestion? The silence was electric. Simone's hand froze midair. Patrice's face blanched before hardening. What are you talking about? Patrice snapped. I have copies, I said, letting my words hang. 2 different truths. And I wonder how a judge will feel about that. They gathered their things and stormed out, but not before Patrice hissed. You don't know who you're dealing with. I smiled faintly. Neither do you. That night, Jalen asked if I was afraid. Of course I am, I admitted. But fear isn't my enemy anymore, it's my fuel. I looked at Mac's photo on the mantel, his smile forever frozen in time. They underestimated me, I whispered. They thought I'd crumble. But I'll fight with what they fear most, truth. The court hearing was only hours away. They believed they were walking into victory. But I was walking in with proof, with a plan, and with the quiet fire of a woman who had already lost everything once. And I wasn't about to lose again. The morning of the incompetency hearing, I stood in front of my mirror longer than usual. I chose my navy blue dress. The one Mac had always said made me look dignified. I pinned on my mother's brooch, a reminder of the generations of women who had endured storms before me. When Jalen came to pick me up, his eyes softened. You look strong. Mom. I have to be, I replied. Today isn't just about me. It's about your father. The courthouse in downtown Charlotte was a gray, imposing building, but as I walked inside, I felt a surprising calm. The hall smelled faintly of polish and paper, echoing with footsteps of people chasing justice or running from it. Inside the hearing room, Simone sat beside Patrice, both dressed in sharp business attire, their faces smug. Reggie leaned in the corner, trying to look composed, but his foot tapped anxiously. They believed today would be their triumph. Their attorney, a polished man with a too bright smile, approached me. Mrs. Turner, we're all just concerned for your well-being. This process is about protecting you. I smiled politely. Of course. Let's protect the truth first. The judge, an older black woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness, called us to order. We are here to determine whether Mrs. Ava Turner is competent to manage her own affairs. Simone's lawyer rose first. Your Honor, Mrs. Turner has been displaying paranoia and confusion since her husband's passing. She's accused her own children of conspiracies without evidence for her safety and financial stability. We ask the court to appoint her daughter, Simone Turner, as guardian. I sat still, hands folded, heart pounding but steady. They brought out their so-called medical witness, a doctor linked to Patrice's company. He testified that, based on Simone's description, I displayed signs of age-related paranoia. He had never examined me. Objection, Marcus said firmly, standing at my side. This is hearsay at best. And Your Honor, we have evidence to the contrary. The judge raised a brow. Proceed. Marcus called our first witness our longtime pastor. He spoke warmly about my clarity, how I had managed community projects even after Mac's death. Then Doris, my neighbor of 30 years, testified that I had been handling daily affairs without issue. Each word chipped away at their narrative. Then came the evidence. Marcus placed 2 sets of papers on the judge's desk, Mac's authentic signatures and the forged insurance documents. We had a forensic handwriting expert analyze these. The insurance papers were signed by someone else, not Mac Turner. Simone shifted in her chair, lips tightening. Patrice scribbled notes furiously. Next, Marcus continued. We have the bank records. Large transfers from Simone's account into Patrice's company and Reggie's firm transactions made just days after Mac's insurance was changed. Clearly, they anticipated funds they weren't entitled to. The judge leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Finally, Marcus handed over the medical files. And here is the most troubling evidence. The hospital's records state Mac Turner showed symptoms consistent with toxic ingestion. Yet the official death certificate lists heart failure. 2 different causes, one truth buried. We believe the discrepancy was deliberate. The room fell silent. The judge looked directly at Simone and Patrice. Do you wish to explain this? Simone swallowed hard. My mother is misinterpreting. I rose slowly, my voice calm but carrying. Your Honor, I may be a grieving widow, but I am not incompetent. My husband's death wasn't an accident. It was a carefully planned betrayal. And the people accusing me of paranoia are the very ones who profited from it. The judge called a recess. Outside in the hall, Simone stormed toward me, her face flushed. How dare you air our family business in public? I met her gaze steadily. Family protects each other. You tried to destroy me. That makes you something else entirely. She froze, the words striking harder than I intended. When court reconvened, the judge spoke firmly. I have reviewed the evidence. The claims of incompetency are unfounded. In fact, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into possible fraud and falsification of medical records. The gavel struck. Case dismissed. Simone gasped. Patrice slammed his briefcase shut. Reggie muttered a curse under his breath. Jalen squeezed my hand. You did it. Mom. But I knew this was just the beginning. Within days, detectives came knocking. The DA's office launched a formal investigation. The forged signatures, the suspicious bank transfers, and the conflicting death records formed a damning trail. Neighbors whispered when Simone's car was towed from her driveway. Patrice's office went dark after a subpoena arrived. Reggie disappeared for a week, only to resurface looking gaunt and nervous. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. Justice was moving on its own now. Still, I made one quiet move of my own. I contacted Mac's old union lawyer and placed the house in a trust under Jalen's name. Whatever storms came next, this home would stay safe. The sweet revenge wasn't watching them fall. It was reclaiming my dignity. It was walking into that courtroom with my head high, knowing Mac's faith in me hadn't been misplaced. But there was one more twist I hadn't expected. A week later, Marcus brought me an envelope. Anonymous drop at my office. He said inside was a USB drive. On it, a recorded phone call between Patrice and a hospital administrator. Patrice's voice. Make it say, heart failure. We'll make it worth your while. Nobody needs to know about the poisoning. The administrator, how much? The sound of a transfer notification dinged in the background. Cold, undeniable proof. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, listening to the recording over and over. My children had not only betrayed me, they had orchestrated their father's death. I thought of Simone's smug smile, Patrice's quick defenses, Reggie's nervous tapping. The lies they had spun like a spider's web, but webs collapse when touched by truth. And tomorrow, the truth would be delivered to the DA. I whispered to Mac's picture on the mantel. We're almost there. Love, justice is catching up. They won't win. I didn't know then how explosive the fallout would be or how much further the lies reached, but one thing was certain. The reckoning had begun. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Once the DA had the recording of Patrice bribing the hospital administrator, the dominoes began to fall. First came the subpoenas, then the arrests. I'll never forget the morning squad cars lined our street. Neighbors peered through curtains as Simone was led out in handcuffs, her designer coat slipping off one shoulder. Patrice shouted at reporters, trying to spin the story as a misunderstanding. Reggie kept his head down, lips tight, already broken under the weight of exposure. The evening news carried their faces, plastered under the headline fraud, forgery, and foul play family scandal. Rocks Charlotte, I didn't celebrate. Not in the loud sense, but inside, a storm had quieted. Weeks later, I sat in the courtroom once again. This time, I wasn't the accused, I was the witness. The prosecutor laid out everything: the forged insurance, the fraudulent property transfers, the manipulated death certificate, and then the phone call. Patrice's voice echoed through the speakers, sharp as a knife. Make it say heart failure. We'll make it worth your while. The jury members stiffened. Reporters scribbled furiously when asked to testify. I rose with steady legs. My husband was a good man. He deserved better than to be erased by greed, and I may be his widow, but I am not weak. I will not let his legacy be rewritten by lies. Simone wouldn't meet my eyes. Patrice tried to smirk, but it looked brittle, like glass about to shatter. Reggie simply wept. The verdicts came swiftly. Guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, falsification of medical records. As the gavel struck, a strange stillness filled me. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even relief. It was something deeper: peace. Mac's truth had been spoken, and so had mine. But the story didn't end in that courtroom. Life after betrayal is quieter, slower. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. The house felt too big, too empty. But then I remembered Mac's words in his letter: "Don't let them steal your spirit." So I began small. I painted the kitchen a soft yellow, his favorite. I cleared the workshop and turned it into a community garden. Neighbors helped me plant tomatoes, basil, even sunflowers that stretched high toward the Carolina sky. Every bloom felt like proof that life could still grow out of ruin. Jalen came by often, his laughter filling the house. He'd inherited his father's steadiness, his way of fixing things, not just furniture, but people. Together we built something new. And when Marcus suggested I share my story with others, I hesitated at first, but eventually I founded the Mac Turner Foundation to help widows and families fight back against financial exploitation. We offered legal advice, therapy, and above all, community. The first woman we helped was from Atlanta. Her brother had tried to trick her into signing away her home. With our support, she fought back and won when she hugged me, tears in her eyes. She whispered, "If you hadn't been brave, I wouldn't have found my voice." That's when I knew Mac's death had not been in vain. But fate wasn't done with me yet. One autumn afternoon, Marcus stopped by with papers. "Ava," he said gently, "we traced the money." The bribe Patrice paid the hospital wasn't from her account. It was wired from an offshore fund, a fund tied to someone higher up. I frowned. Higher than Patrice? He nodded. Someone at the insurance company. They stood to gain if the payout was processed quickly. Patrice wasn't the mastermind. She was only the middleman. The real orders came from someone inside the insurance company, someone who flagged Mac's policy months before his accident. The air left my lungs. For months, I had believed the betrayal stopped at my doorstep, but now I realized it stretched further. That night, I sat on the porch with Mac's picture beside me. They thought they buried you, love, but what they really did was plant a seed, and now The truth keeps growing. I don't know how far this rabbit hole goes. Maybe the corruption reaches deeper than I ever imagined. Maybe another fight lies ahead. But here's what I do know: I am ready. Because I have learned something powerful. Family isn't blood. Family is love, loyalty, and truth. Simone chose greed. Patrice chose manipulation. Reggie chose cowardice. But Jalen chose me. Doris chose me. Marcus chose to stand by me. And Mac, he chose to leave me the tools to survive. That is real family. That is real love. Betrayal had broken me once, but it also rebuilt me. I was no longer the grieving widow they thought they could silence. I was Ava Turner, and I had become unshakable. On the 5th anniversary of Mac's passing, I held a ceremony at the garden. Sunflowers bowed gently in the autumn breeze as neighbors. Foundation families and friends gathered. I read aloud the words etched on Mac's headstone: beloved husband, betrayed father, honorable man. His truth lives on. Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't bitter. They were full of gratitude. And when the crowd applauded, I felt it not just for Mac, but for every person who had ever been silenced, doubted, or betrayed. Here's the truth I want to leave you with. No matter how strong the lies, truth has a way of cracking through, no matter how powerful the betrayal. Love endures longer, and no matter how hopeless it feels, it is never too late to fight back. As I sit here tonight, writing these words by the soft glow of my lamp, I can almost hear Mac's voice. Proud of you, Ava. And for the first time in years, I believe it. But I'll leave you with one last thought, the twist no one saw coming. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from prison. It wasn't from Simone, Patrice, or Reggie. It was from the hospital administrator. Inside, just one line: Patrice wasn't the one who offered the first bribe. Your husband's policy was flagged months before by someone else, someone you still know. No signature, just that. I folded the letter slowly, my hands steady. The fight might not be over. And maybe, just maybe, the real betrayer hasn't yet been revealed. Your turn. If you were Ava, would you forgive Simone and search for reconciliation? Or would you close the door forever to protect your peace? Tell me why. In the comments, your perspective may guide another woman tonight. If this story touched your heart, tap like and share it with someone who needs courage. For more cinematic life dramas told with depth, compassion, and unshakable strength. Subscribe to Voice of Neva and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for speaking your truth. See you in the next story.